All right, let's dive into a story that has all the makings of a classic spy thriller. We've got a Cold War double agent, a promise that was completely shattered, and a 90,000-pound problem that actually forced one of the highest courts in the world to invent a brand new kind of justice.
At the very heart of this whole thing are two really powerful ideas: a spy's solemn promise to his country and the absolute trust that his country put in him. But, what happens when that trust is betrayed and the promise is just broken? And here is the twist that makes this case so incredibly interesting. It brings up this really weird question. If you break a deal, but the other person doesn't actually lose any money because of it, should you still get to walk away with a profit? It's a real head-scratcher. So let's meet our main character. This is George Blake. To the outside world, he was a respected officer for Britain's MI6, but behind the scenes, he was living a complete double life.
Blake's career, man, it was a total whirlwind. He joins MI6 during World War II, but by the 1950s, he's secretly feeding information to the Soviet KGB. Eventually, he gets caught, and they hand him a massive 42-year prison sentence. But then, in a twist straight out of a movie, he escapes from prison and flees to Moscow, where he lives out the rest of his life.
Now, here's the detail that our entire story hinges on. When Blake first joined MI6, he signed a contract. It was an official promise that he would never, ever reveal state secrets. Remember that promise. It's everything. Okay, so let's fast forward a few decades. Blake is living in Moscow, and he decides, you know what? I'm going to write my autobiography. He lands a publisher, gets a nice advance, and in doing so, he is obviously, clearly breaking that promise he made all those years ago. The British government, as you can imagine, is not happy about this, not one bit.
And this is where we get to the real heart of the problem. Blake is set to make about 90,000 pounds from his book deal, but when the British government, which is legally known as the Crown, tries to sue him, they hit a giant legal brick wall. You see, all the information in his book was so old that none of it was technically a secret anymore. So the government couldn't prove it lost a single penny because of the book.
That's right. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Sure, the damage to national security happened decades earlier, but the financial damage from the book itself was, in the eyes of the law, non-existent. And that left the government in a really tough spot.
So this is the $90,000 problem. It just feels fundamentally wrong for a traitor to profit from spilling state secrets, right? But the law's main tool for dealing with a broken contract just seemed totally useless here. The courts were completely stuck. See, normally, when someone breaks a contract, the solution is something called compensatory damages. The idea is pretty simple. You figure out how much money the victim lost, and you make the wrongdoer pay them that amount to make things right. So you see the massive question this creates. If the entire point of the legal remedy is to cover a loss, but the loss is literally zero, is the law just powerless? Does Blake just get to keep the cash and walk away? For a while there, it really looked like that might be the case.
But then, the case works its way all the way up to the House of Lords, the highest court in the UK at the time. And faced with this bizarre legal paradox, they did something bold, something creative. They came up with a ruling that literally changed contract law forever.
One of the judges, Lord Nichols, basically said, look, our usual tools just aren't working here. This is an exceptional case. He argued that sometimes justice isn't just about paying back the victim. It's also about making sure the person who did the wrong thing doesn't get to profit from it. The government has a real interest in making sure that crime, in this case espionage, does not pay. So they pulled out this really unusual legal tool called an account of profits. Now, this remedy completely flips the script. Instead of asking, how much did the victim lose, it asks a totally different question. How much did the wrongdoer gain? And whatever that amount is, the court can order them to hand it all over. And with that, the final verdict came down. It was clear, it was powerful. George Blake was not allowed to keep a single penny of that 90,000 pounds. He was ordered to give up all the profits from his book to the very government that he betrayed all those years ago. So why are we still talking about this old spy case? Well, because the ruling wasn't just about George Blake. It created a powerful new legal principle, even if it's one that's very rarely used.
Now, the court was really clear about this. This remedy, sometimes it's called disgorgement damages, isn't a free-for-all. You can't just use it whenever you want. It's saved for truly exceptional situations where there's a special relationship of trust, and there's a legitimate reason the public needs to stop the wrongdoer from profiting. So, in the end, what the Blake case did was carve out this small but absolutely vital space in the law. It established a revolutionary idea that sometimes justice isn't about fixing the damage. It's about taking away the motivation for betrayal in the first place by making sure that a deep breach of trust simply cannot pay.
And that leaves us with this one big, lingering question that goes way beyond spies and courtrooms. The law found a creative way to make sure this betrayal wasn't profitable. But it makes you think, in a world that runs on promises and contracts, should breaking them ever be a way to get rich? Something to think about.